Right, welcome to chapter 7, the last chapter inside the modern world textbook. That's your orange color textbook, and this leads us to Japan's defeat in World War II, which in terms of structure, this will be very similar to chapter 5, in which you look at Germany's defeat in World War II. So for these two chapters, right, all you need to think about is about the reasons for Japan's defeat. Let me rephrase, maybe not all that you need to think about, but the easy way to structure this, the easy way to think about this chapter, if you have zero knowledge about this chapter, would be to think about them in terms of reasons for Japan and Germany's defeats. Okay, and so if you look at your textbook, the very first page, as do all your chapters, you will realize that there is this big question for you to think about. How far do you agree that the defeat of Japan could only have been brought about by the dropping of the atomic bomb? And there you have the very first reason for the defeat of Japan, and that is the dropping of the atomic bombs. So as we go along, you would realize that Japan was only defeated with the dropping of the atomic bombs. So you can see that all other reasons might be actually sub-reasons that build up to the dropping of the atomic bomb. You can look at it that way, but we will go along the chapter and you'll try to understand and make sense of everything. Now, for this particular event, it is a very momentous occasion in our history so far at the making of this particular video as I speak, because up till now, the only time that the atomic bombs have been used was against Japan in World War II. In the meantime, we have come close. You will learn about this. You will learn about this in the next chapter when we look at Cold War under this particular case study of the Cuban Missile Crisis. But that came close. It wasn't used in the end. The only time that the atomic bombs have been used was against Japan. And they are the only country, lucky enough, if you want to put it that way. No, I think if I use the word lucky, yeah, that's not a very appropriate word. But yeah, they're the only country unfortunate enough to have experienced the atomic bomb. A variation of the atomic bombs have came up. So today I think we know them as nuclear bombs as well, or hydrogen bombs. These are all, we consider them synonyms. Well, scientists might come forward and bash me up and tell me the difference between atomic, hydrogen, and nuclear, but I don't care. You know, I'm not doing science here, I'm doing history. So for the purpose of the entire chapters, well, when we talk about the bombs, just think of them as the same, roughly the same. Of course, if you look up a lot more on the atomic bombs, you will realize that the technology that we possess today have actually allowed us to have nuclear bombs that are far more powerful than the first ever atomic bomb that was dropped on Japan. Now, the reason why I'm dwelling on this part a little bit, because if you are interested, you should go and find out more about the atomic bomb and how it has been used, because there can be actually many moral questions that you can ask, because the dropping of the atomic bombs killed many people. And these people are innocent civilians and not necessarily related to the war itself. I mean, when we are fighting a war, as I've always mentioned this, because we are starting so many wars, when we're fighting a war, it is always between a military and another military. So like people like you and me, but well, I am still considered a civilian unless the government calls me back to go and serve. Yeah, so I'm still considered a civilian. When the war is fighting, we are not supposed to be, not say not supposed to, but we don't have to be involved because we are not under the command of the military or the government. So we don't actually have to participate in the war, and we can be considered innocent bystanders. But of course, if you think about it, there is no innocent bystanders in war. And no, let me rephrase. Unfortunately, it is always the innocents who get hit the hardest during a war. I once heard a phrase before. I once saw something on the internet, with loads of rubbish and all that. I think it was taken from a movie or TV series or somewhere or another. So there was this guy who asked another guy, which is worse, war or hell? And the answer to that was that war was worse. because in hell, you have no innocent people. Now, if you are going to get into a debate with me about, oh, only the guilty people go to hell, how is that right? You're too religious and all that. Well, let's leave that for another day. But according to most religions, or if you're an atheist, I don't care for that. Well, if you don't believe in hell, then there's no need to even argue with me, because in the first place, you don't believe in that, and there's no basis for argument, so you have no right to argue. In most religions, they believe that in hell, well, most people actually go to, yeah, well, in hell, most guilty people actually go to hell, or people who have committed atrocities, people who are sinful goes to hell. And in wartime, the innocent people get killed. So there are innocent people dying there. While in hell, there's no innocent people dying there. So actually, war is worse than hell. Again, up to discussion, up to debates, but that's not the main point of this. I've already spent 5 to 6 minutes talking about this, but I hope to generate your interest in this particular topic, because I think there is many things to talk about. Okay, but if you're not interested, let's move on. Okay, now a little bit of revision of chapter 6. Japan invaded, occupied Southeast Asia. We look at the reasons why they started the war. There are quite a variety of reasons. So in terms of the progress of the war, Japan was very successful in taking over almost the entire Southeast Asia. They took control of the entire region. The Allied forces were more more focused on the war in Europe. So therefore, they didn't bother with this particular area. If you are like me and you have studied the particular battle in Malaysia and Singapore a little bit more than some people, I wouldn't say extensively, but you would understand that actually they did not send their main forces to defend Singapore and Malaysia. The British did send some people, but not enough. And of course, various other mistakes caused us to fall to the Japanese very quickly. So and the US and basically all the allies, they were focused on fighting Hitler. Hitler was the main enemy. Okay, it's like, take care of things at home first, before you deal with things that are happening in your colonies. Right, and so when they were occupying almost all of Southeast Asia, one of the key things that comes up is similar to Germany as well, that they were overextended, that they had very minimal resources in controlling such a large area in which they have invaded, and so therefore this became a problem for them, despite their early dominance. Okay. Now, so we are going to the reasons proper. So the reasons, you will realize that this is quite similar to Germany's one. So it's really not difficult to understand this particular chapter. Okay, strength, then it will be more about the absorbing of all the different small little details. Okay, now strengths of the USA. All right, we all know that the USA is strong, blah blah blah. They have a lot of money, resources, etc. So that is something that is very easy to understand. They're the largest industrial producer. So in other words, they are able to produce many things with many factories. So simply put, they would this particular factory might be producing pots and pans, which are actually still required for war. Producing sofas, which wouldn't be required for war. And what else do I have in front of me? Tables. No laptops then. Okay, yeah, but they were able to switch from producing all these kind of normal day-to-day goods to military equipment. So maybe they might need more weapons. Then they'll stop the production of pots and pans and they'll produce more weapons. Okay, and so it also there were many unemployed people and they were willing to work, so they are able to employ them, put them in the factories to work and produce even more things, and that builds on their economic strength. Now, in contrast, Japan did not have such an industrial foundation or capabilities to support their war effort. They are quite a recently industrialized country. They only opened up to the West like very recent, as you would have learned in chapter 6. So therefore, they are not as strong and as powerful as the USA. And also some of the other points that are being made here. The second one, Japan was unable to protect their merchant fleet from attacks by American submarines, so they simply did not have the resources to compete with the Americans. Okay, and the Japanese economy would continue to weaken and the people continue to suffer shortages. And many of the Japanese factories were also being bombed by the Allies, while the American factories remained out of range of the Japanese attacks. So just look at the map, you will see that it takes a long time for them to fly to USA. In terms of sheer distance, okay, think about it logically, all right? A plane needs fuel, needs oil, needs petrol to fly, okay? And they cannot possibly load, there isn't, at that time, the technology probably didn't allow it. They did not have a plane that was that big enough to carry enough fuel and bombs at the same time to fly from, let's say, USA, no, sorry, from Japan all the way to USA, drop the bombs, and then you have enough fuel for a return flight. It shouldn't be a kamikaze mission like the Japanese usually do, or rather they will feel that it's wasted because since the USA is so big, you cannot probably bomb the entire USA anyway. So if that's the case, it was difficult for them to actually hit. It was difficult for Japan to actually hit USA, and so therefore USA remained out of range from these Japanese attacks. Contribution of women to the war efforts. Now, the Japanese, similar to the Germans, they believed in keeping their women at home, taking good care of the families, and producing babies, strong babies, to eventually contribute to the war effort. If it was like 18 years later or something like that. But the USA, they actively encouraged the women to contribute to the war effort by putting them to work in the factories. You see, the men go and fight the war in the war. Yeah, okay. So the men go and fight the war, and then there's nobody else to work in the factories, right? So you get a woman to actually contribute to work in the factories. So Japan actually made efforts to encourage women to enter the workforce much later in the war, but it was already too late and the industries were crippled. Looking at some pictures, probably propaganda pictures, but still interesting to see them. Okay, so women workers installing fixtures and assemblies to a tail fuselage, which I have no idea what it is, in a B-17 bomber at the Douglas Aircraft Company plants. Okay, working on bombers. Bombers are basically planes that fly very high, dropping the bombs, and after flying away. Okay, operating a hand drill. It's all very propaganda photos. Okay, we are still on USA strengths, by the way. So the first factor is still on USA strengths. Other strengths, rather other than the economic strengths, military and naval strengths. Okay, this is where there are some details that it will be good if you try to remember one or two things. Now, the very first one, the orange one, the Doolittle raid on Tokyo. Now, Japan assumed that USA would not be bombed as it was out of range. Like I said just now, I gave the example, right? It's difficult for them to fly. But this particular incident, it is sort of like a revenge mission for Pearl Harbor. Okay, just to exact revenge on Japan. That's the purpose of this mission. It wasn't particularly to wreak destruction and havoc on the entire Japan economy, but it was simply just a revenge mission. And the purpose of this mission, guess it, it is actually to raise the morale. Okay, so even though the damage is minimal, but it raises the morale, which would actually help in the overall battle and the overall scheme of things. So this was quite a successful raid in which they saw the bombers fly from an aircraft carrier when it was as near to Japan as possible, fly to Japan, drop the bombs, and then they try to crash land in China and try to find friendly troops so that they can survive. A few of them died, if I'm not wrong. Can go and look at the details of this thing called the Doolittle raid. Why is it called Doolittle? The commander of this particular raid his name was Doolittle. So therefore it's called the Doolittle raid on Tokyo. Okay, other things, Battle of the Coral Sea, Battle of Midway, and continued bombings on mainland Japan. All these had significant effect on the Japan's military strength, and they were severely weakened as they lose these small little battles. Okay, so the Battle of the Coral Sea, if you look at okay, if you look at the Battle of Midway, these are small little islands that are near Japan, so that as they secure the islands, they'll be able to put their resources there, continue launching the attack against Japan, for eventual attack against Japan and probably invasion. And they continue to bomb the Japan mainland as much as they can, and they also captured strategic islands such as Iwo Jima and Philippines. So Iwo Jima is the one in which the movie Letters from Iwo Jima came from. Alright, and so some details here, okay, try to remember them as much as possible. I shall pause here for the first part of the video, and I should be able to finish the other reasons in the second, maybe the third video. Alright.